afternoon, and welcome to South Suburban Missionary Baptist Church every moment. My name is Deacon LaVonn Traylor, and I will be your host for today. As you know, this month is Black History Month, and we will be sharing with you some stories of men and women who sacrificed their lives that we might have a better life today. But today, instead of talking about an individual, I would like to take time out to talk about a community in Tulsa, Oklahoma, known as the Greenwood District. The Greenwood District is a historic freedom colony in Tulsa, Oklahoma. As one of the most prominent concentration of African American businesses in the United States, during the early 20th century, it was popularly known as America's Black Wall Street. At the turn of the 20th century, African Americans founded and developed the Greenwood District in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Built on what had been formerly Indian territory, the community grew and flourished as a Black economic cultural mecca until May 31st, 1921. That's when a white mob began a rampage through some 35 square blocks, destroying the community known as Black Wall Street. Armed rioters, many deputized by local police. They looted and burned down businesses, homes, schools, churches, a hospital, hotels, public library, newspaper offices, and more. While the official death toll for the Tulsa Race Massacre was 36, historians estimated it may have been as high as 300, and as many as 10,000 people were left homeless. The incident stands as one of the most horrific acts of racial violence and domestic terrorism ever committed on American soil. In May 2021, 100 years after the massacre, 107-year-old Viola Fletcher testified before Congress. She said on May 31st of 1921, she said, I went to bed in my family's home in Greenwood. The neighborhood I fell asleep in that night was rich, not just in terms of wealth, but in culture and heritage. My family had a beautiful home. We had great neighbors. I had friends to play with. I felt safe. I had everything a child would want. I had a bright future, she replied. Then, she said, came the murderous rampage that was still vivid in her mind 100 years later. She said, I see Black men being shot, Black bodies lying in the street. I smell smoke and I see fire. I can still see Black businesses being burned. I still hear airplanes flying overhead and I still hear the screams. North Greenwood Avenue in Tulsa, prior to the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre, was a main thoroughfare of Greenwood Commercial District. So between segregation laws that prevented Black residents from shopping in white neighborhoods and the desire to keep money circulating in their own community, Greenwood residents collectively funneled their cash into local Black businesses. Greenwood became a robust, self-sustaining community which boasted barbershops, salons, clothing stores, jewelers, restaurants, and taverns, pool halls, movie houses, and grocers, as well as offices for doctors and dentists and for lawyers. At the time of the massacre, Green was considered by many to be the wealthiest Black enclave in the nation. It wasn't uncommon to see the residents stylishly dressed, and some boasted new luxury cars. The incident began on the morning of May 20th, 1921, after a young Black man named Dick Rowland, who worked shining shoes, rode the elevator of Tulsa's Drexel building to use one of the few available segregated public bathrooms downtown. After the female elevator operator screamed, Roland fled the elevator, and rumors quickly spread of an alleged sexual assault. The next day, he was arrested, leading to an armed confrontation outside the courthouse between a growing white crowd and black men hoping to defend Roland from being lynched. As things became heated and shots were fired, the vastly outnumbered African Americans retreated to the Greenwood district. The white group followed, and as night unfolded, violence exploded. Throughout that night and into June 1st, much of Greenwood became enveloped in billowing dark smoke as members of the mob went from house to house and store to store, looting and then torching buildings. Fleeing residents were sometimes shot down in the street. Many survivors reported low flying planes, some raining down bullets or fire bombs. Among the many buildings looted and torched by the white mob was Mount Zion Baptist Church, an impressive brick structure that had opened its doors less than 2 months earlier. It was one of the numerous houses of worship destroyed in the massacre. The east corner of Greenwood Avenue and East Archer Street was the epic center of the Black Wall Street. And in the early aftermath of the attack, among the thoroughfare's landmarks left smoldering ruins were the Stanford Hotel and the Dreamland Theater. By noon of June 1st, Oklahoma Governor Robertson declared martial law and sent the Oklahoma National Guard. Officials arrested and detained thousands of black Tulsans, shepherding them to the local convention center and fairgrounds. There were trucks carrying soldiers and black men. During the Tulsa Race Massacre, officials rounded up Greenwood's black residents, deeming them to be the primary threat to law and order, instead of the members of the white mob who had murdered and pillaged. For decades after the incident, the incident was erroneously characterized as a race riot, implying that it had been instigated by the black community. No one was ever held to account for the destruction or loss of life. After being rounded up under martial law, traumatized Greenwood residents were kept under armed guard, some for hours and some for days. To be released, black Tulsans had to be vouched for by an employer or white citizen. At Tulsa's Red Cross Hospital, victims of the massacre were still recovering from their injuries months later. So more than 300 people were treated for their injuries. According to the Tulsa Race Riot Commission report, the most comprehensive review of the massacre in the year after the attacks, Tulsa residents filed riot related claims against the city valued at over $1.8 million. But the city commission, like insurance companies, denied most of the claims. One exception being a white business owner received compensation for guns taken from his shop. Black Tulsans salvaged what they could from their burned homes and business and began to rebuild on their own. Many Black Tulsan residents fled the city and never returned, but many stayed and started from scratch. Some housed in Red Cross tents until they could rebuild their homes, and later community landmarks like Dreamland Theater. In 2001, the Tulsa Race Riot Commission report recommended that survivors be paid reparations, calling it a moral obligation. The pursuit of restoration continues to this day. The story of Black Wall Street is still under investigation today. The official death toll was 36, but as you read, there were black men and being carried away in trucks with soldiers. They were taken to places where they are suspected to be buried in mass graves. There is an investigation going on even to this day to find and locate the graves of the folks that were lost on that day. But the tragedy is the loss of life. But we can glean from their efforts that as a community of Black people working together and supporting one another, that we too can be successful. We don't need outside influences to make us successful. All we need to do is stay focused and support one another, and we will, once again, just like the Greenwood district, we can rebuild and we can be successful. This is your midweek moment. Thank you for your time. God bless you. See you next week.